I think that when you think about all the ways that God has authority, that's what we've been seeing here in this chapter. That if ever I forget or need a reminder of just how much authority God has over everything that I encounter and everything that I endure, I will come back to this chapter. It began with Christ's power to cleanse an incurably defiled leper. And then, not even being in the same room, he heals a paralytic. Then he goes and he touches the hand of a woman who is dying from a fever, and she is healed. This authority that Matthew's trying to show us really does come out in this chapter. Following that, in verse 16, we read this, that Jesus spent his evening casting out demons and healing all who were sick. So it seems like once that side of the Sea of Galilee was basically disease and things like that are eradicated, he says he wants to get in a boat and go to the other side, presumably to do the very same thing. And once on the other side he gets there, or as before he gets there, there's a storm. And the disciples are worried the whole thing was going to come crashing down. They were all going to drown because of this storm. And Jesus again shows his authority, and he commands the wind and the waves to stop. And so as we've seen, when we want to measure just how much authority Jesus has, we're talking about total, complete, supreme authority. And now, like this chapter, Matthew is not done yet. There's more that we can see. We recognize that Jesus has authority over demons or disease and disaster and also disabilities. But this time we're going to look to see the power over the demons. I know that October 31st is coming. And I don't know how scary the decorations might be in your neighborhood, but I can't imagine becoming or entering a situation that would be more scary or spooky than the one we find right here in Matthew chapter 8. Verses 28 to 34, let's read it. And when Jesus, he, came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him, coming out of the tombs. They were so fierce that no one could pass that way. And behold, they cried out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a herd of many pigs was feeding at some distance from them, and the demons begged him, saying, "If you cast us out, send us away into the herd of pigs." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the waters. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything, especially what happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. So the boat containing Jesus and the disciples had floated 6 miles east to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. It says in verse 28, they landed in the country of the Gadarenes. And this was a small region on the other side of the lake, and it was filled with 10 different cities. The Decapolis is what it was called, because there were 10 cities in this region. Now, any law-abiding Jew would have avoided this place. They would have avoided associating with Gentiles, so they would rarely get out of a boat on that side of the lake. However, what we find here is that verse 18 has told us earlier that Jesus had given orders. He says, "We're going to the other side." And he was fully aware that all the people that are crowding around him, all these Jews, most of them would refuse to follow him there. But the few individuals that were committed enough to go along with him, they were in for a scary scenario. Verse 28 says that when Jesus came to the other side, they were immediately met by 2 men. And if you didn't read any further, you could think this is a nice welcoming committee, but these were demon-possessed people. They weren't just oppressed by the demons. We know that Jesus cast out demons already earlier in the chapter. These were possessed by demons. That means that, as we can see here, as it will describe for us, they were severely tormented that these demons had gained control over these men, and they were now seeking out things like isolation. They were all by themselves. They were preoccupied with death. They had superhuman knowledge and power, and they treated themselves and other people with violent, disturbing behavior. That's what verse 28 tells us, that these two men were here, and they are trouble. So these are the men that see Jesus pulling up in his boat. Maybe he's securing it where it is, and he's getting off the boat. And it says that immediately these men came out of the tombs. These were not elaborate or spacious above-ground tombs that they might have been in. These were like tunnels that were going into the limestone hill that led to an area where corpses were buried, were laid to rest. That's where these men were. Luke chapter 8 says the same story. Mark tells it as well. But in Luke it says, for a long time they had not lived in a house, but among the tombs. They didn't sleep much, because Mark tells us that all night and all day they were shrieking and cutting themselves with stones constantly. Furthermore, in verse 28, Matthew again adds that they were so fierce. They weren't just mean. They were absolutely dangerous and difficult to deal with. So much so that anyone walking past could not get through that way. They stopped everyone. They attacked everybody. They were fierce. Mark tells us that people tried to bind them with chains and shackles, probably to keep them from harming other people and themselves. But no one was strong enough to actually make this work. Not the people themselves, but also not the chains which they kept breaking apart and the shackles that they wrenched into pieces. And they were violent. It says in verse 28, no one could pass that way. People knew what was over there. They knew they could not pass that way, because every time someone would disturb their cemetery silence and solitude, they would go out and with force push people, make them flee back to where they came. So these are the people that were immediately there when Jesus is getting out of the boat. They come out of the tombs to meet Jesus. So I want you to imagine just for a moment that the disciples, maybe you're one of them, in this boat, and they've just experienced this storm that almost killed them. Jesus calms the storm in a deadly tempest, and they're on the sea. Now they finally think, let's get out of the boat. And now there's another storm waiting for them on the land. And what was going through their Jewish minds? I mean, here they are in the Gadarenes. It's the Gentiles area. They're unclean. Maybe they noticed the pigs in the distance. That too is unclean. These men are coming out of the tombs. They are unclean, and they are possessed by evil spirits who are unclean. Yet Jesus is exactly where he intends to be. It was him who gave the order to say, we're going to the other side. We will land on this shore, and we will meet these two men. This is Jesus at work. You know, Jesus came into the world so that he would confront and conquer all of the evil forces that are wreaking havoc in this world. That's what he came to do. Not just for the Jews, but for the Gentiles. And not just for people, but to redeem all of creation. So he has come, and here he is confronting the evil forces, physical forces, natural forces, spiritual forces at work. He crosses the Sea of Galilee, and he also crosses from heaven to earth in order to destroy the works of the devil. Now, you're probably aware that some of the angels that God originally created good as servants of the Most High, they rejected the Lord, along with Satan, and they rebel against him and their divinely appointed positions. Those who have intimate knowledge of the Trinity, these are demons, but they once worshiped and served in God's holy council. And they were there, and they willingly committed treason against God to go off, and until the rest of their time is done, they hate, they lie, they deceive, and they try to ruin all of what God is doing in this world. In the meantime now, demons are trying to steal. They're trying to kill. They're trying to destroy what God is doing. They oppress God's precious yet weak human race. And they try to deceive them about God. They try to tempt them into sin. And sometimes they gain such control over individuals like these two here that they torment people to an extreme degree. And the people in that area seem to say, well, we need to remove them. There's nothing we can do, so they need to go out of the city and they need to be away from everybody else. There's no hope for them. And here comes Jesus bringing the hope. Mark chapter 5 includes some of the dialogue between them that Matthew omits. Jesus asks them, what is your name? And instead of the men responding, it sounds like the demons respond from within the men. It says, my name is Legion, for we are many. And if this is referring to a Roman legion, which is more than 5,000 soldiers, we can assume that there are a frightful army of demons, thousands of demons that have somehow taken control of these two men. So this is extreme. This is far beyond what he perhaps had cast out in verse 16. Casting out demons with a word. Here, there's thousands within these two men. It's extreme, it's intense, it's severe, and that's what we need to recognize for this story. The question that we're left with is, does Jesus have, what kind of authority does Jesus have? Does he have enough to combat this level of evil? And Matthew records their response to Jesus. Verse 28 told us that they met Jesus. That is, that they came out to approach Jesus. Jesus didn't necessarily go to them. They came out when he arrived. Luke 8 says, they came out of the tombs immediately to meet Jesus as soon as he stepped off of the boat. They're there. And what are they going to do? Mark specifies what this meeting looked like. He says that when the demon-possessed saw Jesus from afar, they ran to him, fell down before him. It's the same sort of posture that the leper willingly gave, that the centurion came with the humility and saying, Lord, I need you. But here, even though they're unwilling, they see him and they immediately surrender. No one else could control these men, but Jesus appears and they are on their faces. And they ask in verse 29, they're panicked, they're crying out in terror, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? And I think we can learn something here, very fascinating, about the relationship between demons and Jesus. The first thing that we can see is that they have no trouble identifying Jesus is the Son of God. This human form that Jesus Christ took on doesn't mask, doesn't make them mistake who Jesus really is. From afar, they see him. That when they see Jesus of Nazareth, they see Jesus, the Son of God. It can't mask the glory of the one that they once worshipped as the King of heaven. And so they see him, they identify him, and there's no mistake. Later in the Bible, in James chapter 2, there is the statement that the demons believe in God. They believe that he has all the power, all the authority over them and everything. And because he has that authority, and they know it, they don't bow to him willingly, but they still know who he is. And because of that, it says that they quake and they tremble when he shows up. They shudder before the Lord because they are aware that there will come a day that there's certain and final judgment. There is a time, they say, before the time, they say, that there is a divinely appointed event that they know about that is coming when they will be judged. They will be thrown into hell and receive the righteous wrath of God against them for their treasonous sins. They live now with condemnation. They know that they are condemned in the end, and there is no salvation for them. And they live with the dread of torment, of inescapable judgment in the future. And the third thing that we learn here is that demons are struck with panic when Jesus shows up. And do you realize why they're so fearful of him? It's not just his authority, it's because Christ is the one who is going to torment them in hell. That is their tormentor. They ask, Jesus, have you come to torment us before the time? He will do it at the appointed time. They don't understand the incarnation, and they wonder, this is our tormentor. This is our punisher. Has he come early? And so, as powerful and as destructive as demons may be, they are terrified, and they cower in the presence of the Son of God. They know that there is no escape, that their judgment is sure, and although they are unwilling, they bow in the presence of Jesus. And so when they, like Matthew notes in verse 30, they notice that there's a herd of many pigs out in the distance. And so they beg Jesus in verse 31, since you're going to cast us out. That's the implication. Not if you're going to cast us out. You're going to torment us. So when you cast us out, can we go into those pigs? It's interesting to note that they ask for permission. They don't expect anything from Jesus unless Jesus agrees. They have no authority over Jesus whatsoever. So we begin to wonder, well, what's the deal with the pigs? Why do they ask for the pigs? Well, Jesus will teach in chapter 12, a little bit later. When an unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places, and it seeks a new place to dwell. But if it finds no place for it, it will try to return to where it came from. And so it seems as though that demons desire to dwell in a body of some kind. People, and here in this case, if not people, then animals. These pigs were the closest bodies that they could attempt to inhabit. And so they ask. And interestingly, Jesus approves. Both Mark and Luke say it this way. They say Jesus gave them permission. So they wouldn't do this unless Jesus said okay, that Jesus agreed to it. And with just one word, he commands thousands of demons who can't but submit immediately and obey completely. There's no negotiation here. They know that they're done. There's no tricks that Jesus performs. There's just one word. And actually, if you'll notice, if your Bible has red letters, there's only one word from Jesus in this whole text, this whole paragraph. One word, go. And every single one of those demons, thousands of them perhaps, go immediately. They do as they're told. That is the absolute authority of Jesus on display one more time. And verse 32 tells us, so they came out and they went into the pigs. Now I want you to note how many were in this herd. Mark tells us that it was about 2,000 pigs. So there's 2,000 pigs and thousands of demons, which sort of connects the dots here, that they are looking for that many bodies to go and fill, to dwell in. So I want you just to imagine that you're on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. There's a steep cliff climbing from the water. And there's thousands of pigs in the distance. It's normal. They are pig farmers there. And lots of pigs just in a mundane meadow, just eating and feeding like everything is normal. When Jesus arrives, things begin to change. All of a sudden, verse 32 reads, that whole herd began to run. And they rushed down the steep bank. And unlike animals who normally have an instinct to self-preservation, to avoid danger, they just keep running right into the water where they drown themselves. Why is this part of the story? Why is this part of the story so significant that Matthew and Mark and Luke all include this in the Bible? Well, what makes this significant is the proof that it provides. There's a couple of things here. Everything was normal until Jesus arrived, until Jesus gives a command. And then it changes. When he spoke one word of command, thousands of demons left the two men. And how do you prove that? How do you know that it actually worked, that Jesus has that authority? Well, how do you explain that at the very same time, thousands of pigs nearby became as savage and as wild as those two men had been? That in the same moment, at a word, these two men are put back to what they should be. They were restored, and all of a sudden, all these pigs just go rushing into the water. It's also interesting that the fate of the demons, they go into these pigs and they're washed away. They're drowned. They're dead in the lake. And it matches their ultimate destiny, that what their judgment will be. In Revelation 20, verse 10, it states that the devil, along with all the demons, will be destroyed in a lake, the lake of fire, where they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So the demons were right. Jesus truly is the Son of God, and he has the authority of God himself. And what we see in this picture is like we see in all of the healings. Jesus is going to one day put everything right. So all of these individual pictures are a sample of the future day when he will do it all. And so it is here. He casts out the demons and he throws them into a lake, which is to show that this is what he's going to do finally and fully on the last day. As economically devastating as that would be for those pig farmers, they're out there minding their own business, herding their pigs, however that looks, feeding them, and all of a sudden, everything's gone. Their whole business is gone in a moment. Verse 32 turns them into evangelists, though. They could have been devastated and thought, what is going on? But they run into town. And it says in verse 33, the herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything. Not just the pigs, not what happened to them alone, but especially the demon-possessed men. What happened to them? It tells you that these men weren't too far away to see what was happening, to realize what Jesus had just accomplished. Mark and Luke said that they spread the news everywhere, in the city and in the country. And the news about Jesus' power, it started to spread so fast and so far, like it did on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus has authority everywhere, and with all people and all animals and all spirits. And so we read, behold, Matthew concludes in verse 34, all the city came. And it says that they came out to meet Jesus. They weren't there necessarily to see the pigs or what happened to them. They were there to see Jesus, this man who could do these things. And Luke says that what they found was more than Jesus. They saw evidence, not just the pigs, but also that these two men that were possessed, that were uncontrollable, that were shrieking, that were such a big problem and threat to all the people, here they are, and they are now sitting at the feet of Jesus with their clothes on and in their right mind. The witnesses, Luke says, they confirmed how Jesus had healed them, and then all the people asked Jesus to leave. Matthew, in verse 34, says that they begged Jesus to leave their region. Now this, I think, is more perplexing than the pigs. Why did they reject him? Why did they tell him, you need to go? Please leave our region. A lot of commentators suggest that they were upset about the pigs. It was economic loss in the pigs, and so they said, this is a problem. We need to get this guy out of here. I don't think that the gospel writers really get to that or lead us to that point, although it could be that. Other commentators will say that they thought he was this magician, that he had this magical power. He was exorcising demons. They didn't know what to think. They were uncomfortable, and so they sent him away. But I think that's reaching too far. All we know is that Jesus did this miracle, and they said, we can't handle this. They wanted him to go, and that's it. Matthew doesn't give us more. At least it doesn't feel like it. But if you go back and look at the whole chapter, this just continues what Matthew's been doing the whole time. He has been giving us demonstration of Jesus' authority, one after another after another. He doesn't give all the details or the dialogue that Mark and Luke give us. He just focuses so much on what Jesus does and can do. And he wants us to respond. That's what he's led to. We see that he has so much power. This human has divine ability to command leprosy to go, and it obeys. He can command paralysis to go, and it obeys. He can command a fever to go, and it obeys. And then Matthew stops, and there's this crowd that Jesus notices, and he gives a command. He says, we're going to the other side. He commands them to go, and they don't obey. And then along the sea, he commands the storm to go, and it obeys. And then he commands a legion of demons to go, and it obeys. Then we have another crowd form, and they're commanding Jesus to go. It seems like Matthew's aim is to plainly present the proof of Jesus' amazing authority. And then he wants us to respond as well. Will we bow to him like some do, or will we beg him to leave like so many others? Here's a sobering thought. Everything in creation, everything obeys him without hesitation, whether it's disease or disaster or demons. They all obey, but not people. People hesitate, they deliberate, they negotiate, they vacillate, they fluctuate. They're unlike all of these other things that just hear the word and obey. Human hearts resist his commands. They reject his authority. And after all of the miracles, all of the healings, all of the evidence Matthew is showing us, he's also showing us a tragedy. And the tragedy is that the Son of God has crossed over from heaven to earth to destroy the works of the devil, to cast out all the demons that are at work against us in this world. And shockingly, people would rather cast Jesus out. That's when we have to ask ourselves, what is it that stops us from submitting to Jesus' authority? What is it that causes us to beg him to not come into our lives, to leave parts of our lives alone? And I think it's fear. Luke specifically mentions that the people, that when they saw him, they were seized with great fear. They were afraid. And it's not fear of evil. It's fear of surrender. Fear of how much power does this Jesus actually have? It's like the disciples after the storm stopped, and they were saying, who is this man? They're fearful because they have never seen any kind of authority like this before. I mean, we all say we want to submit to Jesus. We love the idea that he would rescue us from our storms of life and our sicknesses and all of the things that ail us. But we don't want to surrender our lives to the point where his authority will tell us commands over our lives how we are to live. It makes us feel exposed when he commands us to flee from sin and to confess it and repent. It makes us feel threatened when he begins to take control over us. But that's what his authority demands. He will disrupt our lives from where we're at. He will make us uncomfortable and take us to uncomfortable places at times. But what we need to see here in this chapter, yes, we can be fearful, and we should fear the Lord because of his great power and command and authority. But at the same time, we find that the leper and the centurion and the woman and the disciples and the demon-possessed, they all find freedom because Jesus uses his authority to rescue those who submit to him. They yield to his authority, and they're all freed. Yet many continue to refuse to submit. The truth is, when we're confronted with his absolute authority, it exposes how deeply we have been deceived by the devil and his demons. To what we think about God, how we fear and we push him away rather than draw him close. His authority should strike some fear in us because of how great it is, but it should also bring to us security for our souls. Because it's not just neutral authority. We've seen this, that he who cleansed the incurable defilement of the leper can cleanse our sinful hearts with his authority. Because the one who mobilized the paralytic was able to mobilize our dead spirits, spiritually dead. The one who relieved the woman of the fever is able to relieve our fearful minds and our sick souls. The one who calms the storm is able to calm our lives and everything that comes against us. The one who drives out the demons is able to drive away and protect us from all of the demonic attacks in this world. So his authority is a fearful thing, but it is a good person who has such great authority. He came into the world to destroy the works of the devil. Ephesians 2 describes us all like this. We are spiritually dead, and we are blindly following the devil, the prince of this world. And we are all condemned because he's deceived us, and he's got control over our lives because of sin as well. But when Jesus comes into the world, he came to confront and to conquer the works of the devil, to destroy his power over us, and he uses his authority to accomplish that very thing. And what he does is he goes through life just like us in human form. And he lives perfectly, sinlessly, righteously, so that he can now die as a fitting and perfect sacrifice for the sins of the whole world. And through that, Colossians 2:15 highlights what he has done. He has erased the record of debt that stood against us, and therefore now he has disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in Christ. Therefore, now anyone who submits to the authority of Jesus will find freedom, like these two men, from the powers of evil in this age and the control of demons that we face. Why? Because our Savior is the Son of God. So as you behold the greatness of our Lord and his authority one more time in this chapter, will you bow to him or will you beg him to leave? Don't send him away. Let him stay. Let him lead. Let him speak. Let him rule over you. Because wherever Jesus reigns, there is freedom. And wherever Jesus is obeyed, there is joy and peace. And wherever Jesus is trusted, there is